When it comes to characters in the Spider-Man pantheon, you've got a wide variety of characters to choose from to headline a movie. You've got all the ones who run around with Spider in their name, have some type of animal-related quirk, or the one that just loves talking in the third person, but instead, Sony decided to continue with their own Spider-Man-inspired universe with Morbius, for some reason. So let's talk about who he is, what he can do, and how this movie is gonna build out the Sonyverse. So back in the 70s, the comics code stopped being such prudes and let the classic monsters, your vampires, werewolves, and occasional reanimated corpses, back in comics. With the ban being lifted, Roy Thomas started work immediately to get Peter Parker and some bloodsucker together, which culminated in Amazing Spider-Man 101 in 1971. This fight between the two happened when Peter had 6 arms because he tried to get rid of his powers. But back with Morbius. He wasn't born a vampire or anything like that. Michael Morbius was initially just a regular kid from Greece who was born with a rare blood disease. Because of the disease, he ended up spending much of his childhood in isolation, but after winning the Nobel Prize in Biochem with his friend Emil, they thought, hey, what if we did an experiment using a vampire bat and some electroshocks to cure your disease? And the results turned out just as good as you think they would. Ever since then, he's been coming into conflict with heroes and villains while he himself has struggled with using his powers for good, while also needing to get some of that sweet, sweet blood to survive. After he got hit by lightning, he stopped being a vampire because that's how that works, and ended up working alongside Spider-Woman and the West Coast Avengers until that pesky bloodlust came back. But he's also worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. during Civil War, Armor, which is like S.H.I.E.L.D. or Sword, but specifically for extra-dimensional activity, and of course he fought Blade, but they aren't mortal enemies like you might think. Outside of the comics though, his most popular and recognizable adaptation is from his short time on Spider-Man the Animated Series back in the 90s, although he was also an Ultimate Spider-Man, so if you err on the younger side, you might know him from that too. Now, as his nickname would suggest, the living vampire, for all intents and purposes, Morbius is a vampire, but because comics are confusing, he's not a true vampire because instead of getting his powers from some form of mysticism, he got it from his experiment gone wrong. Now, Marvel has ended up adding some mystic arts to his character during the Rise of the Midnight Suns arc, but again, it's confusing and muddied. The reason that I'm telling you this is because since he's usually depicted as not being supernatural, he doesn't have the same weaknesses like the whole crucifix and wooden stake through the heart thing. He's still a little sensitive to sunlight though, so that's still a thing. In the trailer, it seems like it's not gonna be related to mysticism at all, but you never know. When it comes to his powers though, all the superhuman boosts to speed, strength, stamina, agility, and reflexes that you'd probably expect from a guy that looks like this are all there, but he's also got the cool vampire powers like having a healing factor, although it's not strong enough to heal missing arms or legs or anything like that. He does have retractable claws on the tips of his fingers, Sabretooth style though, so that's cool. He can glide at speeds of around 35 miles per hour, even though it's only at short distances. And after a run-in with the Lilin, which are just a type of demon, they're barely important, he gets the power to hypnotize and mesmerize people if he maintains line of sight with them long enough, and unless the person has a strong enough level of willpower, so your Captain Americas and your Namors of the world, he has full control over them. He also has the ability to make more vampires through the same way most other vampires do, but the vampires he creates don't have the same healing factor, so aside from the strength boost, they're basically regular humans that he can control if the whole mesmerizing thing doesn't work out for him. He also has a genius level intellect, which is why he's been such an asset to all those different superhero groups mentioned before, and through his first introduction, we also find out that his blood can be used to heal mutations, like with the lizard Kurt Connors or Spidey's extra arms. Okay, now on to the greater implications of the character. So with Venom being fairly successful, Morbius out soon, a Madam Web standalone and standalone Kraven movie in the works, can't wait for that one, Sony is really going through every character that has connections to the Spider-Man mythos and trying to make something out of it. Since this is the second character that Sony has given their own full-length movie, we really don't know how they're going to interact with each other. In one of the trailers, Morbius jokes that he is Venom, and we get another callback to that from a detective, but whether or not they'll actually interact remains to be seen. Weirdly though, Michael Keaton is supposedly back as Adrian Toomes and is going to have a somewhat significant role if the trailers are to be believed, even though you should never really believe them, but whatever. What's so weird about this is how it muddies the universes even more. We see a shot of Oscorp in the trailer, which isn't in the MCU yet, a shot of some Spider-Man graffiti, although we don't know who this Spider-Man is, and everything is just very confusing now. Is Morbius gonna be the movie that merges these universes together after we saw Venom at the end of of No Way Home? Does this mean that we might actually get that Blade crossover? We still don't know yet, but if they keep making movies that are inherently tied to Spider-Man's legacy and still make it work somehow, I'm all for it. Morbius is the definition of a tragic character, and it's looking like they're really going to amp that up for the movie. Morbius would have never been in my top 2 to start a cinematic universe, but if this means Kraven gets to be weird, dark, and aggressive, I'll take it.